this idea of having to help another with a similar issue is at the core of 12-step work. I'll read you the 12th step, and then I'll read you the 12th effort. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. That's the 12th step. The 12th effort. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these efforts, we tried to carry this message to other seekers and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Very basic changes here between steps and efforts, right? So all the efforts come from the 12 steps. The reason for the change in languaging is just simply to make the efforts, the beauty and the magic of the 12 steps available to more people who struggle around certain turns of phrase, certain words in the original 12 steps. The spirit of the 12 steps, the work of the 12 steps does not change. It's just a different orientation in this languaging. So having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these efforts, rather than these steps, of course, right? We tried to carry this message to other seekers rather than the word other alcoholics. We're just expanding the term out even beyond addict. We're expanding the term out to seeker and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Okay. So we come now to this beautiful place. Interesting that in the 12th step, 12th effort, we're recognizing that a spiritual awakening has already occurred in these first 11 steps. And in point of fact, the spiritual awakening, it is suggested that the spiritual awakening happens after step 9. So steps 1 through 9, that process, that entire process, brings about the spiritual awakening that is described. Building a bridge to a higher power, developing a relationship with that power, and having had this spiritual awakening. The awakening is what? It could be described as from finite consciousness to infinite consciousness. Having a sense of being alone to having a sense of being a part of everything. Being driven by one's own self-will, self-desire, disconnected from the spirit, disconnected from consciousness itself. The difference between that and choosing to align one's free will with the will of God or higher power or consciousness. Using our will to align our free will with God's will, or the will of the universe, the will of consciousness itself. What a powerful thing to be able to do. And the whole process of steps 1 through 9 really is about a removal of the things that block us from our ability to align with consciousness itself, with God. In steps or efforts 10, 11, and ultimately 12, that is a way of life. One day at a time. 10, 11, and 12. It describes a way of life. A way of waking up. A way of going to bed. So the bookends of the day, so important. How we wake up in the morning, how we set ourselves and align ourselves and practice that on a one day at a time basis turns out to be the foundation for an extraordinary life. I used to wake up and just float through the day rather than using my will, my free will, to align myself in this new relationship with the infinite. It is something that's available and possible for anyone to do. The 12 steps talk about it. The path of yoga talks about it. And there's very specific and powerful details and a map and a compass to follow here. So that 10, 11, and 12 are the way of life. 1 through 9, all the work that was necessary to get to live this way of life one day at a time. Speaking about God consciousness, this idea of my demands of the external world, my demands upon people, my expectations, my resentments, my challenges, all of it, the result of this misalignment, my insistence that the world align itself to me rather than me aligning myself to consciousness, to God, finding acceptance, finding willingness, finding humility, and opening myself up in a kind of way which automatically leads me to the next right thing. That could be referred to as intuition. Knowing the next right action, developing that sense of go this way, not that way. Intuition. To open oneself up in the way that I'm describing is essentially like having a sign on your head pointed up to the heavens or in every direction, if you will. And then the sign reads, open for business. Employ me. Guide me. Show me. Inspire me. Lead me. Guide me forward. And so those first 9 steps, or 9 efforts, if you will, allow us to clear away all of the things that block so that we can begin to feel this alignment. And we can begin to understand the feeling of when you're in or when you're out of that alignment. The thing that we know for certain, and this is proven through all of our direct experience, when we go through these steps, we will surely not be perfect. We will continue to make mistakes. We will be challenged by life. Things will show up we could never have imagined, like this year, for example, for most of us. And we will be asked to find our center. We will be asked to remain steady on the path, in questioning, in observation, working on being kind. Perhaps one of the most important things we could do right now, or whenever people are challenged, is to find a way to be kind and understanding of people's fear. Understanding that when people are in fear, they behave in very unconscious and sometimes hurtful ways. From a place of centeredness, we can see it clearly, and we cannot be triggered or move into reactivity because of someone's unconsciousness, but instead develop that beautiful muscle of understanding, which leads to compassion, and then later on sets the garden. It lays the seeds for forgiveness, and that forgiveness of course, has to extend to ourselves as well as to others. Having had this spiritual awakening, stepped onto a platform where we're now open for business, humble. I don't get to do whatever my ego wants to do. I mean, I can do whatever I want. We all have that free will too. But I don't get to do it without paying a tremendous price. And I've seen that. My sponsor used to tell me, Tommy, you can do anything you want as long as you're willing to pay the price. I never liked it when he said that. But the lesson is not lost on me. And I really started to learn what the prices were for ego-based selfish behaviors. And I also learned the benefit and the joy and the effectiveness and skill of living in a more aligned way. Now, the practice of yoga and meditation have been central for me to find that alignment along with these 12 steps. As I said, when you finish these 12 steps, you'll continue to make many mistakes and life will challenge you. And, of course, this is just, the 12 steps are really the first step. It's just the beginning. And we want to keep expanding our awareness, expanding our consciousness, building this relationship always in this way of life. 10, 11, and 12. So having had this spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, as the result of these efforts, we tried to carry the message to other seekers, to other alcoholics, to other addicts, to other people interested in having what we have. What do we have? We have a way of life that allows us to show up in adversity. Equally, we can show up in joy. And we can even recognize that a profound transformation has taken place in us, where we no longer fight, argue, get drawn into negativity, morbidity, that's just not part of who we are anymore. And in those moments and on those days when we're not centered and we make some mistakes and we get pulled into argument or we get pulled into anger or we get pulled into negativity of some kind or another, we're able to see it and humbly say, I've got work to do. I'm a little off center. Let me clean that up. Let me come back to center and let me try again. No shame, no guilt, just a continuing effort through life. It's beautiful. That continuing effort results in great things. You will become an example of victory. People will approach you and they will say something to the effect of, I heard you were going to those meetings. What's it like over there? Or you look good, you look like you're doing well. Like, what are you up to? Or someone else will come to you and say, can I talk to you for a minute? You're going to have one of those conversations where somebody that's been sort of on the periphery, maybe a friend, maybe an old friend, or maybe a new friend, or someone who's just been sort of in the periphery, and they're going to come to you and say, can I get a minute of your time? I'm experiencing something difficult. You will go through life, and these interactions are just going to happen naturally. You don't even have to try for some of these. Okay. But let's get to the trying part. So our job any given day is to set ourselves up for centeredness. To set ourselves up, having had this spiritual awakening, our job is to set ourselves up to be the best that we can be. What do? We wake up, we say a prayer, guide me today, guide me in my thoughts and actions. I could use all the energy and all the support I can get, and I'm really open to it. I'm really open. I'd like to be of service today. Sometimes we wake up and something really challenging is on, you know, a health issue with us or a friend or family member, or, you know, gosh, I'm looking to get some meaningful employment, or I'm really struggling around money right now. You know, I could use some extra help. And I really feel that from the humble position of, I'm here to serve. We can begin to say a prayer like that and not have it be selfish. It's not, you know, can I get a lot of money for me? It's, can you help me not to be in a state of poverty or challenged by financial insecurity? Can you help me not be there so that I could better show up in this world and serve? And there's a real beautiful, beautiful energetic difference there. Yeah. So we set ourselves up in the morning, a little yoga, a little meditation. I'm always working with my own mind to recognize the thoughts and emotions as not being me. That's not my true self. Those are rising and falling. Thoughts come and thoughts go. We all know that. Emotions come and emotions go. We also know that. That's been in our direct experience. You only need to look at your direct experience to understand the transitory nature of thoughts and emotions. Well, what is not transitory? What is here? Consciousness is here. The part of me that is watching my own experience. The witness mind, if you will. The higher mind. The part of me that is interested in my well-being. The part of me that is interested in being free. That's always been here. It has never gone away. I may not have been able to connect with it, but that's not because all of a sudden it wasn't here. It's always been here. But not so with our thoughts and emotions. They come and they go, and we can check our own experience so that you know that what I'm saying is based in truth. It's the kind of thing where if you check your own experience, you'll know, you'll have experienced what I'm expressing to you now. So having had this experience of awakening and deciding to be of service, open for business, we get to be more of ourself. And this is one of the most important things about being of service. I'll tell you a story, and this can bring to light some of my earlier concerns about being of service. I used to think about these examples of service which were unattainable to me, like Mother Teresa, a woman who had literally given up her life to live in the slums of Calcutta and to serve humanity in a way that I just could never imagine serving humanity. And I would go to these meetings, these 12-step meetings, and I would see people in those meetings who were genuinely like amazing people. There was one guy in my mind in particular who had taken so many people through the steps, had literally saved the lives. I really, really mean it. Think of it, maybe 500 to 1,000 people in his life. He had taken that many people through the steps and changed their life and given of his time. And this guy was like cigarette smoking and drinking coffee, and his body, God, he looked so uncomfortable in his body. He was so heavy and unhealthy, and it wasn't an image of what I felt I aspired to be. I definitely aspired to the saintly, giving quality of his life. Like, I mean, the guy was like a saint. But I couldn't emulate his physical example. It wasn't appropriate for me. And I had a massive thought come in one day, a download from above. And the download was, you will serve as you can uniquely serve. You will find a way to engage in a meaningful way in the world that only you could do. And I recognized that that was true for everybody. Nobody had to be Mother Teresa. I didn't have to be or become this man. I just had to become more of me, but be willing to serve from there. That if I was asked to do something, as long as it wasn't completely insane and out of alignment, I would do it. And at the beginning, I had to ask therapists and guides and mentors and sponsors, can you help me with my intuition here? Here's what's being presented. Does this sound like a good idea? And sometimes I would present some ideas and my sponsor would look at me and be like, no, 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 that's not what we're talking about. And other times I would say, here's what's come up, and they would say, yeah, this is a good opportunity for you to be helpful. The big takeaway for me was I had to become fully me, not in an arrogant, selfish way. I had to become fully me, accept what I am and what I'm not. Develop myself in various ways to be of more service. I started studying yoga, and I could help people in their body and with their breath and with their mind with meditation. I studied nutrition, and through my own life, I also studied health, wellness, and nutrition. And I realized I could help people like that. I experienced alcoholism. I experienced drug addiction, and I experienced cigarette addiction and codependency and other addictions. And so I came through those things, and I learned how to come through those things. And I realized I could be a support to other people like that because those were in my unique skill set. But the thing that's most important, I think, here is the willingness to show up and be supportive, to engage in the world in a meaningful way, but not in a way that doesn't align with you. There was this one time I had 5 or 6 sponsees. And I remember saying to my sponsor, like, I'm really at my limit of how many guys I think I can help right now. Like, I'm really at my limit, and I'm traveling a lot and going out of town. And my sponsor said, well, just work with those guys. And if somebody else asks you, tell them you'll be your temporary sponsor, but you'll help them to find somebody because you really don't have the kind of time that you want to dedicate to them. And so one time at a meeting, this person came up and asked me if I could be their sponsor. And I said, well, I can't be your sponsor because I'm traveling a lot and I'm very busy, but I will help you to find a sponsor who's great for you. Someone else at the meeting overheard me say that. And they took me aside and they said, at this meeting, when somebody asks us to sponsor them, we just simply say yes, no matter what. Now that was a conflict. That was a conflict because it wasn't actually appropriate for me to take on another sponsee. So what I learned from that was I have to be careful about black and white thinking. I also have to be careful about how I project what I think is correct onto somebody else's schedule or somebody else's life. Like, I'm only responsible for me. And as long as I'm open and willing to be supportive and helpful, the universe will show me through guides and through intuition and through the way my body feels what's right and when I can say yes and when I may need to say no. The reason I bring that up is because it's so important in this crew is we all struggle a little bit with boundaries. We struggle a little bit with codependency. And when we help people from a place of deficit, meaning we're starting to feel tired or we're starting to feel overwhelmed or burnt out, helping people from that place, not a good idea. So if you're getting to that place, you need to do a little self-care and always say yes, and I'll help you and I'll help guide you. But there's a limit, right? There's a limit to what we can do. Now, how did Mother Teresa do what she did? She was uniquely suited to do what she did. She became completely herself and she served in that way. I'll follow her example, become completely myself and serve in this way. And I encourage and invite you into this discussion with yourself, this inquiry. How can I be of service in the world? Now, with specific regards to the 12 steps, or the 12 efforts, if somebody asks you to sponsor them and you say, yes, I'd like to take you through the steps, it's one of the greatest honors. And it's one of the most powerful things you could ever do in your life. And the times that I've done it have been so rewarding for me, I can't put it into words. It deepened that connection, well, certainly with another human being, but this connection that we're talking about with consciousness itself, the connection of the universe, the connection with God or higher power, that's all deepened and strengthened by showing up in the world and doing this work. And so in the times when I've done that, that's been incredibly powerful. And to get to see someone else's transformation is an amazingly beautiful thing. And if you've been through the steps and you want to take somebody through, make yourself available and have this experience. And if you don't know what to do, you ask your sponsor, or you remember, how did you go through the steps yourself? Of course, if you haven't gone through the steps, then you won't be taking anybody else through the steps until you have that experience. But it's such an unbelievably powerful thing to do. So service is not about any one particular service. Service is more like an attitude. It's an attitude that you step into of, I'll show up. I'll look for ways that I can be of service. You can be of service to your family, your parents, your children, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings. You can be of service to your employer. You can be in service to yourself. You can be in service to a set of principles. You can serve the principles of kindness, of compassion, of love. And so you see, taking someone through the steps is a form of service. It happens to be very profound, but it comes out of a energetic stance of, I'm in service. Not sometimes I'm just in service. And being in service, I'm led forward into the next right thing. And when I feel uncomfortable or I feel out of alignment, that's my work in that day, is to check that. Why am I out of alignment? The universe might be asking me to do something or to not do something that either I'm not doing or I am doing. And so that's that beautiful way of life. That's the result of having had this spiritual awakening, is we now enter this state of service. So I'd like to read you a little section from my book, and then I wanted to read you a couple of really beautiful quotations from Bill Wilson. So let's see here. Okay, we are, is that it? Oh, here we are. Okay. Okay, so at the end of this chapter, I think it's chapter 8 in Recovery 2.0, I wrote the key to step 12. In fact, after each step, I wrote the key to each step. So here's the key to step 12, or effort 12. The word seva in Sanskrit, in English, it means selfless service. This is the highest form of yoga. Nothing cuts through the ego as efficiently and completely as service. The final step in the 7 steps to happiness, which is a teaching in Kundalini Yoga. The final step before achieving happiness is developing the strength to sacrifice. To sacrifice is to give up something of value in service to a person or an ethical principle. Interestingly, when we make sacrifices, something of greater value is often realized. Like, for example, when we sacrifice our time for another person and receive the joy that comes from giving. Most people want to help others. It is in our nature to do so. I kind of want to repeat that. Most people want to help others. It is in our nature to do so. However, when we live in the frequency of addiction, we have a sense of lack. Our needs are not being met, and we focus more and more on that. We may find it is hard to give of ourselves to another, especially without wanting something in return. Step 12 tells us, forget your troubles and put your hand out to another. Do it without expecting anything in return. The most exceptional blessings will come your way. You may only be able to help a few, but you can still bless everybody. Perhaps the single greatest gift of recovery is that it prepares you to experience the joy of helping another person. You will become stronger, have more time, and be happier than you might believe possible. So this is what's waiting for us in that energy of seva, that gorgeous, gorgeous energy of selfless service. Selfless service. I have a plane flying overhead. Hang on. So I'd like to read you a couple of quotations from Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And to me, this is some of just the greatest wisdom out there. He writes, "To the world, you may be one person, but to one person, you may become the world." We often forget how powerful our presence, our love, and our attention to somebody can be. So important not to underestimate that. Just giving somebody else your attention can change their life. Of course, there's this famous one. You can't think your way into right action, but you can act your way into right thinking. And that goes back to the famous Einstein quote of, a problem cannot be solved at the same level of consciousness where the problem was created. In other words, we can't think our way out of a problem we thought our way into. But we can act our way into thinking correctly. And it really is a beautiful thing in that it underlines and emphasizes the necessity for action. This is not a spiritual path of complacency. This is a spiritual path absolutely driven by engagement and correct action in the world. And so we must remember that. And our actions can lead us to better thinking. And I love this one. True ambition is not what we thought it was. True ambition is the profound desire to live usefully and to walk humbly under the grace of God. How beautiful is that? I'm thinking about a rainstorm, or I'm going to use a little French here. I'm thinking about a shitstorm, and you're protected under this umbrella of God's grace. How incredible. Just love it. And then here's the result of all of this. Here's the result of all of this. Bill wrote, he spoke and wrote, he said, "Nowadays, my brain no longer races compulsively in either elation, grandiosity, or depression. I have been given a quiet place in bright sunshine." Isn't that amazing? So, in this day and age, when we're encountering a very unusual year with very unusual demands and great uncertainty and difficulty, we remain on the path, not despairing, seeking to understand, not to judge. Staying away from argument and divisiveness. And these days, it takes a lot of effort. It really takes a consciousness to decide at the beginning of each day, I'm not going to argue today. I'm not going to judge anyone else for their position, because it would be a waste of my time and energy to do so. Instead of my judgment, I'm going to work to be the greatest example of light and love that I could possibly be, so that it could possibly positively affect someone else's day today. And I'm going to practice that and go through that one breath at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time for the whole day. I'm going to do the absolute best that I can to stay out of argument and stay in an example of kindness and presence and awareness. And when I fall short, it's not if, when I fall short, I will catch it and I will immediately clean it up, correct my alignment, and move forward. No guilt, no shame, because those also are a waste of my energy and will not help me to be the example that I need to be today. All of this is available as the result of these steps, as the result of these efforts. As Bill W. said, you too can be given a nice, quiet place in bright sunshine. It's just so awesome. So, the 12 efforts, the 12 steps, if you haven't worked them and you find yourself struggling, if you have worked them and you find yourself struggling, return to the basics. Ask yourself, where is my will getting in the way? Where am I dependent upon an external thing to be a certain way in order for me to find happiness? Where am I dependent upon a person or a place or a thing that is getting in the way of my happiness? How can I bring myself into correct alignment? What is the way for me to do that? How can I align myself with the consciousness that is thread through the entire universe, through all things, and even through me? Because something in my ego, in my mind, in my insistence that things be different is getting in the way of me being able to find the flow. And that's our effort on a one day at a time basis. Like that airplane getting in the way of your happiness. I would say not getting in the way of my happiness, but I would admit getting in the way of my concentration. So we've come through the 12 efforts together, at least in terms of an analysis, a presentation, an explanation, a deeper understanding of them. I urge you to work through the steps, through the efforts, work through them with a sponsor. Ask somebody. If you don't have a sponsor, the way you get one is you go to a meeting. These days, those are mostly online. So you go to Zoom meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. Go to intherooms.com, that wonderful, wonderful community of people that offer all kinds of meetings all day long. Go to Recovery 2.0 meetings. That's at r20.com/meetings. Find a meeting, connect with people, build a community, and someone there is going to stand out to you as someone that you would really like what they have. And that means their consciousness. And you ask them, could you walk me through the steps? Typically, A man will work with a man, a woman will work with a woman. There are exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, from a heterosexual perspective, you'd want to work with somebody that you couldn't possibly be attracted to in that way, because you're getting into very intimate territory when you go through the steps with somebody, and it's very important to keep that on a certain platonic kind of level. So there you go. Okay. Let's allow the eyes to close. And let's end with the Recovery 2.0 prayer. Inhale to begin. Universe, put us in the places you want us to be, with the people you want us to be with, doing the things you want us to do. Thank you for the joys and challenges of our lives. Amen. And Satnam to each of you. Blessings and love. Thank you so much for being a part of this community and for paying attention to your own development and becoming. It's just the most incredible thing. I'm deeply inspired by this community. And let's just keep going. Speak.